Welcome back, everybody. So today I wanted to show you how I scale recipes in BeerSmith. I've been making a lot of small batches over the past year, and I just put out a video not too long ago on my 2-hop series featuring Cascade and Centennial. And somebody commented they like Citra and Cascade. And I wanted to do Citra Cascade and Citra Centennial in some beers. And I was thinking, because it's the middle of summer, it's hot here, and a pale ale would be good. So I went on the internet and searched some pale ales, and one that came up is the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. On their website, this is the only homebrew recipe they have on there right now, so that's what we're going to use. So we're going to go start to finish. We're going to make a couple small batches of different kinds using Cascade and Citra, then Centennial and Citra. But let's get our base down, and this would be like my base recipe that I would brew, so I knew what it tasted like. Then we could see what the Citra added. So I've got it in a paint. So here's the recipe. 2-row pale, 1.8, 92. 92 is the amount of that grain used in the overall recipe. Then Crystal 60L is 8%. So let's jump back into BeerSmith and let's go ahead and start the recipe. So I've started a new folder. Let's go add recipe. Name, we're just going to call it Clone Full for right now. And because I've been making a lot of small batches, if it's a full batch, I usually put full on the end. So this is going to be an all grain. Then we are going to make this in the Anvil Foundry 10.5. I got the profile. So let's add that. So we know that we need a pale malt. So we'll type in pale. And we only have 2 options. Now, my local homebrew has the raw, so let's do that, and let's just set it to 9 pounds right now. And let's add the 60L. There are options. I'm just going to pick the first because I don't know what my homebrew store has. And per this, they're all SRM of 60, so we should be good as of now. So by adding those 2, we're also going to change the style to a pale just so we have a template. This down here is more of a template guideline than actual. You could be in the green and be fine. You could be in the yellow and be fine. You could be in the red on some of this and be fine. But as long as they're in the green, I would say you're going to get a balanced beer. If we look at this right now, we are at 4.8% ABV. Now, there's a couple ways you can work this. Let's go back and see what our mash is. So if we look down here, mash 155 for 60 minutes. Boil time is 90 minutes. So we know we're going to boil for 90. So let's jump back over and change that. So boil time, we're going to push that to 90. And what that's going to do is it's going to change our pre-boil, because we're going to boil for 30 minutes longer. So right now with 90, we're at 6.56 gallons. If we move that back down to 60, we're at 6.31. So you want to make sure you're adding water if you're upping the boil time. Obviously, you're going to boil off more. So let's go over to the smash. We want to mash for 60 minutes at 155. So right now, my basic profile is 150 for 75, so we need to change that. So if we look at here, I've got a 155 and I've got a 155.90. We don't need the 90, but technically you could mash for 90 minutes. But on this one, we are only doing 60, so we will pick this profile. There we go. Go back to the design. Now, so 4.4% ABV. There's a couple ways you can do this. I like to add everything first because we could sit here and let's say, okay, well, what's the ABV and IBUs have to be? If we look, I've went to Untapped and pulled what they say is the ABV and IBU because on here we only get an end gravity of 2.8. So easiest way, it might not be 100% accurate. You might want to buy a bottle or a 6-pack to see what that says, and hopefully it says it. But we're going to work with these two numbers because that's what's on tap right now. So for the ABV, 5.6%. We could start playing around with these. We could use the increase. If you use the increase amount on the right, it's going to go up 1/4 pound each time. Or you can double click and we could change it here. So it's up to you. This is more clicks to change it here, I believe, than just clicking increase, decrease, and you can see it change here. So at 9 pounds, 8 ounces, we're at 4.7. We're at 90.5. We need to be at 92. So we could keep on upping this if you wanted to do that. There we go. So we're at 92 and 8%. That gives us our 5.6% beer. Let's just call that good for right now. So we're at our ABV. Let's go back. Hop schedule. Now these are using whole cones. I'm going to use pellets. It doesn't give us an alpha acid, but going by Untapped, we know whatever alpha acid it is, using these hops, it has to come out to 38. So we have 0.5 at 90, 0.75 at 60, 2 ounces at 30 minutes, 2 ounces at flame out. So let's go ahead and plug those in real quick and see where we end up. So we are at 1/2 ounce at 90, then 1/2 ounce or 0.75 at 60. Now you can keep clicking on that, or you can select it, copy and paste, then double click and say 2 ounces at 30. Then we can copy that one and say flame out or 0. So going by the default of 5.5 alpha acids on the Cascade puts us at 55. As we know from Untapped, we want 38. So we would have to adjust this. But I know from my Cascade that I have, it's 4.4. So we're going to change these to 4.4. If you know what yours is at the beginning, when you copy and paste, you can do the first one, then they go through, so you don't have to constantly update each one of these if you don't want. If you do have whole hops, you could use them, but I do have whole hops, but they're homegrown, and I don't know what the IBUs are or the alpha acids, so I'm not going to use them for this brew. So by changing all this per my system, it's 44 IBUs. Now, you could get a lower alpha acid at your local homebrew. You could get a higher. Online, I don't think they tell you what it is going to be. You will not find out until you get them. So if you're building a recipe, I would highly suggest calling the place, local homebrew store, or just getting more than you need, because you're going to have to change something. So going by this, we know we want it to be 38 IBUs, so we have to change something. I believe at Flame Out this edition, even though BeerSmith is saying no IBUs are introduced, I believe there are. For the simple fact, It's still boil. It's still hot. You're going to put some in there. How much? I don't know. So I would change the highest one right now. So we have 2 ounces that are introducing 19.8. So if we take this, let's decrease it and see if we can get to that 38. So we're a little short if we do 1.25 ounces. But again, like I said, I believe this last addition at Flame Out is going to add some. So I would call that good. So now we need yeast. If we go back over here, it says California yeast. We're going to use US-05 because that's what I have on hand. There we go, 1 package. Now, we were at 5.6. Now we are at 5.9. And that's why I was saying I wouldn't really play around with this. Just put some numbers in there until you get the whole, at least the malts and the yeast put in. Now you can do the hops later if you would like, but you at least have to have the malts and the yeast in, because now we're going to have to play with this a little bit more because we're at 5.9 and we want to be at 5.6. So now let's decrease this and see. Okay, so there's 5.6. So this is a little high. What happens if we decrease this? 6.4. Again, we're going by a quarter of a pound. So what happens if we say 0.85 pounds? That's 7.2. So can we do 0.9? That's 7.6. We're still at a 5.6. What about 0.95? That gets us really close. It gets us down to 5.6. So it says 1 pound. It's rounding up. I don't know if I up this, then decrease it. So sometimes this happens. So that's 11. And this is actually 0.95. So I don't think you can get this to change to actually show 0.95, but we're pretty close. We're 0.1 off, so I'm going to call that good. But again, make sure before you start playing to get your ABV, you put your grain and your yeast in, because it will change it. So on this one, I would call this good. So this is our 5-gallon batch. So let's close this. Let's copy it and paste a new one. And right now, we're just going to rename this small batch. So let's open it. So now we have the ability, we can scale. And the reason I like to make the 5-gallon or a standard original batch, then scale it, is once I hit scale and we go through it, it's changing this one that's open. So if you change this, it might not go back to your beginning or your original one. So let's go ahead and scale. So this is the batch we want to take it to. So small batch. I have the profile in here. Let's click OK. So we're going 1.25 gallons going into the fermenter. Brewhouse efficiency 72, that's fine. If you want to change it, you can. We're going to match the original gravity, color, and bitterness. So let's hit OK. It's changed it. Now, one thing, because you switched the profile, boil time is now 60 minutes. We need to change this. We need to go into our mash and make sure this is correct, which it is, so we're good there. And if we look, we're at 36.7 IBUs and 5.8 or 5.6 ABV. So we're good. We can look and see, yes, some of these numbers are going to be off, but that's going to happen when you scale a recipe from, say, a standard 5-gallon batch. We're still one off, so we are perfectly good. So this is the batch I would make first. Now, what we can do is, like I said, I wanted to make a Citra Cascade beer. So let's copy this batch and let's name it small batch. We'll do Citra Cascade on that. Hit OK. Let's go in here. So now we have some options. Usually I like to make more than one. So technically, we know from BeerSmith, our last edition at Flameout isn't going to add any IBUs. So the next batch I would do, let's substitute this for Citra. And I know my Citra is 13.7. So this I would just leave. Yes, again, I think at the end of the boil, flame out, you're going to add some bitterness, but I don't know how much, so I would call this one good. Close that. Now we're going to copy this again, and we're going to rename. We're going to say batch 2. And just to be sure, let's go on here and put batch 1. Let's open batch 2. So we have this Citra, and I wanna do 2 and 2. So 2 Cascades, 2 Citras. Let's change this second one. I feel at the 13.7, if we change the first, we're probably going to be under 10. Here, let's just do this to see. So let's substitute Citra. We'll keep that there. We'll go 13.7. Come into here. And now we're at 57.2 IBUs, 30 IBUs. I wouldn't want to put in under 0.1 ounces. You could do that. You're still at 40. I wouldn't do that. So let's substitute this back for Cascade. I think it was 0.11. And that was 4.4. There we go. So we're still at the 36.5. Let's try this one. Let's substitute Citra 13.7. We'll keep it at 17 right now. So that takes us up to 67.3. We know we need to come down. I want to change this to 0.1. That's the least amount I'm willing to go. So we're still at 48. The next biggest one is this Cascade. So let's push that down to 0.1 and see what we get. That gets us to 40. How about if we change this to 0.1? So that gets us, 40.1. This is where I would stop for this one. I don't see any reason to go under, and technically you could change this. We could change this to 0.3, but it's not going to do anything to this because BeerSmith thinks or has calculated that after flame out there's no IBUs. So I would call this good here. We're still boiling for 90 minutes. Our mash in is 155 for 60 minutes. I would call this one good. So let's copy our small batch. Again, this is all the Cascade. There we go. And let's rename this one to Citra Centennial Batch 1. So now we have that. let's open this. So obviously this one, we're going to make Centennial Citra, but I want to almost follow what we had in batch 1. So batch 1, we did all Cascade, then we did Citra. So let's go here and let's substitute Centennial in for this. My Centennial is 6. Substitute 6. So there's those 3. Now this is going to go to the Citra, which I could have copied the other Cascade with Citra, but we're fine. 13.7. So let's look at this. So we're at 50. So we do need to lower some of these. And this one, it looks like it's the highest. It is the highest. So let's take that down to 0.1. We're at 41. Let's change this to 0.15. That's 34. So let's up this and let's go 17. So there we go. So 35.3. I think that's close enough. I would leave this one here. So let's close this and we'll close this one. Let's copy this one. And this will be batch 2. And on this one, we kind of want to do the same thing as we did for the Citra Cascade batch 2. So because of that, we know we want to change this one to Citra. And we're going to be at 13.7. And see what we get. We're at 50. So on this one, what can we do? Just like on the other one, we can go 0.1. And do 0.1 on this. And this is where I would leave it. Yes, we're going to be a little bit higher. If we go back and look, we need 38 IBUs, and we're at 40, or 44.8. So I would leave this here. Again, you could go under an ounce to get it, but I think this is fine. We're still in the green. It's not going to be the same. We're using different hops, so it should be good. So that's pretty much it. That's how I scale most of my recipes. Again, I think the biggest thing is put in your malts, put in your yeast, then play with your ABV. Then for the hops, make sure you know your alpha acids, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get your IBUs right. I don't think I've ever seen BeerSmith show the correct IBUs or alpha acid level percentage for any hops that I had, and that's why I don't change them. You can go in to the library and change these all, where's it at? All the alpha acids, but what I find, every batch that I get is different. So there's no sense in going in there and changing every single one. It's easier for me just to do it in the thing, or in here. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any comments or questions below. And until next time, happy brewing.